I came home from the hospital on a Wednesday morning, the sunlight a little too bright, the air in our house too still. I wasn't gone long. 2 nights, just enough for the doctors to run scans and ensure the concussion didn't come with hidden damage. A cycling accident, cracked rib, mild head trauma. I should have been grateful I was intact. But the second I stepped into the living room, something felt off, a detail I couldn't name yet. The couch was perfectly arranged, her throw blanket folded in that deliberate way she liked. But the stillness wasn't peace. It was silence, almost staged. Then I saw them. 2 glossy concert tickets on the table by the window. I hadn't bought them. We hadn't even talked about concerts. They weren't just tickets. They were for a band she never liked. A nostalgic rock group I played in the garage when I cleaned. Front row seats. Bought weeks in advance, judging by the date. My name wasn't on either one. In the closet, one shelf down from her boots, I noticed something else. An empty space where a pair of sneakers used to be. White and barely worn, still with the laces coiled like she'd never used them. I'd teased her once that she bought them for style, not steps. Now they were gone. I asked her that night about the tickets. She was putting lotion on her hands standing by the sink, the bathroom light turning her wedding ring into a halo of glass. "Oh," she said, "I went with a colleague from work." She had an extra, spontaneous thing. Her voice had that casual lift she always used when she didn't want questions. I let it slide, but it stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. A week later, I saw it. I was scrolling through Instagram while waiting in line at the pharmacy. A mutual acquaintance, a guy we both knew from high school, posted a photo from the concert. The stage in the background, a sea of people. And right there in the corner, framed perfectly in the light of someone else's phone flash, was her, my wife, hand in hand with a man I didn't recognize, their fingers locked like a promise. I stared at it until my vision blurred. It wasn't just the holding hands. It was the way her body leaned toward him, like muscle memory, like this wasn't their first time. That evening, she told me she was leaving on a business trip. 3 days, she said, brushing her hair in the mirror. "I'll call you every night." I didn't sleep that night, and in the morning, I followed her. She drove like always, not even speeding. An hour and a half later, she checked into a hotel on the edge of a nearby town. Not alone. The same man from the photo was with her, wearing a hoodie, holding her luggage like he'd done it before. I didn't confront her. I just sat in my car with the engine off, fingers tight around the steering wheel, staring at that hotel sign through the windshield like it might spell out a different story if I blinked enough times. Back home, my breath still shallow, I broke the lock on the chest she kept at the foot of our bed. It was old, her grandfather's, supposedly where she kept childhood things. Inside, under a layer of scarves and letters from her late mother, was a folded envelope worn soft with time. The letter was old, its ink fading. It was from him, the same man. A love letter dated 4 months before our wedding. The handwriting was wide and personal, like it was meant to be whispered. Phrases like, "always been yours," and "should have never let you go." And at the end, his full name, the same name that was now signed at the bottom of the hotel system receipt I found online later that night. The next morning, I called my father's lawyer. The inheritance I had left, the last untouched portion from the fund my grandfather left me, was split in trust. By afternoon, the paperwork was underway. Half of it moved into a personal holding account under my name. Irrevocable, no spousal access. That same evening, I sat down with a prepaid phone and created a fake profile. Posing as her brother, I sent a mass message to everyone on her contact list. Extended family, mutual friends, her boss. No caption, just a photo. The one from Instagram. Her, with him, in line for the stage. The angle was sharp enough to leave no room for doubt. 2 days later, I called in a favor. A buddy of mine worked in a mid-sized insurance firm that serviced both corporate and personal policies. Through him, I had her medical insurance frozen, citing financial deception tied to spousal trust breaches. It wasn't permanent, but it would take weeks to untangle. Enough time for the message to land. I drove to her parents' house in silence, the receipt from the hotel booking printed in high resolution. I slid it into an envelope and wrote, in block letters on the front, "This is your daughter." I rang the bell, handed it to her mother, and walked away without a word. She didn't return home. A week later, her cousin came by with a moving van. She didn't come herself, didn't even call. The house felt hollow, like someone had pulled the wires from the walls. Every night I walked past her empty vanity and remembered her saying once, half joking, "This mirror only loves me when you're not looking." I guess that's what she wanted, a version of herself untouched by truth. Through the courts, I reclaimed everything. The diamond earrings I gave her on our third anniversary, back. The car she drove, leased under my name, repossessed. A bracelet from her birthday, the one she claimed she never wore because it didn't match anything, returned to the safe it came from. One by one, each object returned to me like wounded soldiers. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed the air cleared. No debt, no illusions. On New Year's Eve, I stood on our lawn with a bottle of cider and a pack of cheap fireworks. At midnight, she messaged me. Just 5 words. "Can we please talk now?" I lit the fuse on the first firework. It hissed, then cracked into the sky, leaving a trail of red. I lit another, then another. One for every lie I could remember. One for every night she said, "I love you," while her heart was somewhere else. The sky burst with noise, but all I could hear was silence, pure and hollow. And in that moment I knew. This was only the beginning. The week after New Year's was quiet, not peaceful, just quiet in that unnatural way a forest feels right before a storm hits. Her number stayed blocked, but I knew she was still in town. Mutual contacts whispered. Her belongings were gone, her family humiliated, and yet she hadn't officially filed for anything. No divorce, no separation notice, just silence. That more than anything kept me restless at night. Silence always meant plotting. I started reviewing the finances with the same obsession I once reserved for our wedding plans. I'd built a decent nest egg, part inherited, part earned, and while we had separate accounts, a few shared ones remained untouched in the chaos. I combed through bank statements line by line. Most were routine, but one pattern stood out. Charges at a particular high-end restaurant, weekly like clockwork, and always at lunch hour on weekdays. She never once invited me to that place. I would have remembered. I went there on a Wednesday, wore a button-down shirt, played the role. The place was small and expensive, the kind where reservations meant you belonged. I asked the waiter casually, "Hey, my wife and I were thinking of coming this weekend. She loves it here. She's a regular, I think. Usually with a man, older guy maybe, works nearby." The waiter hesitated. I didn't need a name, just confirmation, and I got it. "Ah, yes, she usually comes with a man in his 40s, he said, adjusting silverware. "Polite couple. They usually sit near the window." He smiled like he'd given me a gift. That same afternoon, I called a cab and had it wait across from her office. I watched her come out, blazer sharp, hair styled like she was walking into a commercial shoot. She didn't take the bus or subway. Instead, she slipped into a silver car parked down the street, driven by a man I'd never seen up close. I followed on foot. 6 blocks. They stopped in front of a narrow brick building with no signage, just a plain buzzer panel. She pulled out keys. Not his, hers. Later that night, I pulled property records. The building was registered to a former university professor of hers. I remembered the name. She used to talk about him when we were first dating, the kind of mentor she claimed changed her life. I hadn't heard the name in years. Now he was back, not as a teacher, as a second life. The next week, I enrolled in a local business center near that same man's department. They offered evening seminars open to the public, no background checks. I introduced myself as a freelance strategist looking to pivot industries. I shook hands with the professor on the second night. He didn't recognize me. Or maybe he did, and he was good at hiding it. We made small talk. I kept it light, played dumb, asked questions he liked answering. A few weeks in, I received a generic invitation from the business center for a private open house reception. I RSVP'd yes and showed up in a dark gray suit, carrying a bouquet of lilies. Her favorite. At the door, I was greeted by the event coordinator. I brushed past her, found the professor standing by the drinks table, speaking to a small group. I walked up, smiled, and extended the flowers. I'm Travis, I said steady, husband of the woman who sneaks in here at night. The air died in the room. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. Someone dropped a glass. The coordinator's smile twitched. I didn't need to say anything else. The damage was done. I turned and left without waiting for the echo. That night she came home unannounced, and she must have used the spare key. She stood in the hallway like a child trying to explain a broken vase. I said nothing, just walked past her into the dining room, pulled out the oak chair we'd blessed on our wedding day, part of a set gifted by the church pastor. I brought it down hard on the floor once, then again. The legs cracked on the third hit. She flinched but didn't speak. I left the splinters where they fell and went upstairs. The following morning I visited the bank. I withdrew everything from our remaining joint fund and changed the primary account holder to my father. Legally sound, irreversible, she wouldn't even be able to check the balance anymore. I then filed a request to audit her car's license history, routine in my state if flagged under a domestic financial review. The results came within days. She had been fueling a second vehicle, a hybrid sedan not registered in her name. She'd filled that tank 7 times last month alone. Through an anonymous account, I submitted a complaint to her company's HR department. Conflict of interest, inappropriate relationship with an academic associate. I used careful language, just enough to warrant a pause. By the end of the week, she was suspended pending internal review. I didn't gloat. I didn't even watch it unfold in real time. I just knew, like the tide knows when to pull back. At our next family dinner, hosted by my cousin, she showed up. I don't know if she expected forgiveness or just familiarity, but she brought a cake, smiled at the kids, laughed too loudly. I waited until the meal ended. Then I handed her a single folded note right in front of everyone. Her hands trembled when she opened it. "You are no longer part of this home." That was it. Nobody said anything. The silence wasn't shock, it was agreement, a shared acknowledgement of her absence long before the note had made it real. In the days that followed, I canceled all our shared insurance agreements. Health, dental, life. Each contract dissolved. I stripped her as beneficiary, terminated her medical power of attorney, changed every password, moved our remaining legal affairs under a private executor with no digital trail. But I kept one thing, the wedding ring. It sat on my dresser like a dead satellite. Once connected, now orbiting nothing. I took it to the garage on a Thursday evening, the smell of metal, oil, and memory all hanging in the air. I dropped the ring into a cast iron cup, fired the torch, and watched it melt. Gold doesn't scream, but it begs in silence. A soft glow, then collapse. It cooled into a flat coin, worthless in trade, but it felt like something I could carry, just long enough to remember the weight. Everything in the house was quiet now. No more strange perfume on pillowcases, no missed calls, no fake conferences, just me, the walls, and the silence I'd earned. But I knew better than to feel peace. It wasn't over. She hadn't filed anything yet. No papers, no counterclaims, just waiting. And when people wait in silence, it's because they're planning to scream. It started with a box. I wasn't looking for anything that day, just clearing space in the hallway closet, trying to put this chapter behind me. The winter coat still held her scent, and I needed that gone. But the box was wedged in behind a suitcase I hadn't touched since our last family trip. It wasn't hidden well, just buried under time. The outside was unmarked. Plain cardboard sealed at the edges like a careless afterthought. Inside, children's toys, a rubber giraffe, a pack of tiny socks still tagged, a blue pacifier, a plastic ring stacker, all unopened, brand new. We didn't have a baby. We tried, or at least I thought we had. Doctors, tests, that brutal year of silent disappointment. I'd had a vasectomy 2 years ago after we'd accepted that 2 was enough, or so she said. But these weren't toys for Jeremy or Melissa. These were for someone younger, someone new. I asked her that evening. She had the nerve to sound casual. "They're for my nephew," she said, eyes flicking sideways like a liar who's practiced the answer too many times. "Didn't I mention that? His birthday's coming up." She had no nephew. I didn't confront her again. I just watched. Over the next week, I noticed she left at 3 p.m. sharp every single day, even when working from home. Always returned with the same navy blue tote bag. Always smiling when she came back, like she'd visited a part of her world untouched by this house, this life, this shame. So I followed. I took my car but parked 3 blocks behind. Watched her drive to a quiet street in a suburban pocket just west of downtown. It wasn't a neighborhood she'd ever had reason to visit, but she pulled into a daycare center, walked right in like she belonged there, like routine. From my spot across the lot, I saw her through the window. She helped a little boy get dressed. Jacket, boots, small backpack with dinosaurs on it. He hugged her. She kissed his forehead. And then he called her Mom. My world cracked. A man pulled up in a different car and joined them. He was older, clean cut, put together. They talked casually. He smiled, placed a hand on her waist like it was second nature. The boy sat in the back seat as they both climbed in front. I didn't follow them. I didn't have to. I had the boy's name by nightfall. One reverse search on a tag photo her friend posted months ago. A birthday party I never even heard about. I ran his name through school records, then social media breadcrumbs. I found his birth certificate, under father, blank. The next morning I filed a DNA test request. A contact I had, a quiet one from my college days, worked in a lab, no questions asked. Through her, I got the child's test sample discreetly from a used napkin pulled from the daycare trash bin before closing. 3 days later, the result came in. 99.8% biological match. He was mine, my son, and I never knew. The days that followed were surreal. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just functioned like a machine loaded with one single directive. Take it all back. I drove to my hometown and met with my oldest friend, Miles. We hadn't spoken much since the accident, but I handed him a sealed folder containing every document I'd gathered. You know what to do if I don't come back, I told him. He nodded without asking questions. I went home and filed a formal petition to strip her of all inheritance rights under spousal fraud and financial deceit. A clause in the trust agreement allowed for it, rarely used but binding. She'd never touch a dime of what was meant for my future children. The next week, I appeared at a city council meeting. She was scheduled to receive a community grant under a family uplift program, complete with speeches and photographers. I requested the floor during the open forum. My words were calm, too calm probably. I didn't name her outright, but I handed the organizers a manila envelope filled with the birth certificate, the DNA results, and a timeline of dates that contradicted her application's narrative. She was removed from the program within 48 hours. The local press didn't pick it up, not yet, but word spread fast through the school board and community network. Her phone calls started again, from new numbers, different email aliases. I ignored them all. My lawyer sent a demand letter requesting repayment for every fertility treatment, test and therapy session I had undergone under false pretenses, all while she had been raising a child I didn't know existed, fathered by another man, yet linked to me without consent. At our final legal conference, the judge asked if I had anything to say before we adjourned the session on inheritance rights. I placed a single toy, a blue plastic ring from the box, on the table. I didn't look at her. This, I said, is all that's left of her. The judge said nothing, just nodded and finalized the documentation. That evening, I walked through every room of our house and boxed up the rest of her traces. Hairbrush, coffee mug, old journals, perfume bottle still half full. I left them by the front door. She never came to get them. A distant cousin picked them up a week later without saying a word. I didn't ask which cousin, didn't care. The only thing she tried to keep was a silver bracelet, the one I gave her on the day we found out she wasn't pregnant, the one she cried over like it meant something pure. Turns out she wore it on her visits to the daycare, a kind of token, a lie disguised as loyalty. I kept that bracelet, not out of sentiment, but because I needed a reminder that she wasn't some stranger who hurt me by accident. She had known exactly what she was doing, and now every person in her orbit knew too. There was no violent confrontation, no dramatic screaming, just precision, just the clean cut of consequences meeting truth. But even now, I couldn't shake one final thought. If she had told me all those years ago, that there was someone else. If she'd confessed even once, maybe this pain would feel less surgical, less hollow. Instead, she buried a life inside another life, and now the echo of that child's voice haunted even the good memories. The next morning, I made one final call. A man answered. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence bleed through the line, long enough for him to feel the weight. Then I hung up. A month after the court closed her appeal, I packed my last duffel bag and drove north until the roads emptied and the sky turned silver. Montana greeted me like it always had in my childhood memories. Raw, endless, and mostly forgotten. I rented an old forge on the outskirts of a shuttered mining town. The place had been dead for decades, nothing but rusted signs and bone-dry wind. But the structure stood firm. Thick timber, concrete foundation, and an iron chimney that still remembered fire. I didn't speak to anyone the first week, just bought tools from liquidation sales 2 towns over. Welder, anvil, blower fan, clamps, hammers, the kind that felt like they had stories in them. I wired the electricity myself. There was no running water inside, so I hauled it in barrels from the river and boiled it over flame. At night, I slept in the attic, curled in a sleeping bag, surrounded by the hum of old beams and silence thick enough to feel. Work kept me breathing. By spring, I'd build a rhythm, forge in the mornings, sharpen in the afternoons, and collapse at night with my arms still shaking from the effort. What began as therapy slowly became craft. The first pieces were crude, uneven horseshoes, warped tongs, metal so soft it bent under its own weight. But soon I was shaping things that held meaning. Belt buckles, knife hilts, pendants shaped like thorns. The locals noticed. Ranchers came by with broken gate latches and snapped trailer chains. Then bikers from the edge of town showed up asking for forged bracelets, rings, anything built to last longer than their tempers. I didn't advertise. Word traveled on its own. By the end of that year, I had a small but steady customer base. The forge was breathing again. Teenagers began showing up on Saturdays. A few of them had lost fathers, some to addiction, others to bad roads and worse choices. They came with silent eyes and too-thin jackets, looking for something they didn't know how to name. I let them watch it first, then I handed them hammers. One of them, Cody, was mute, lost his dad in a fire. He didn't speak, but he swung a hammer like he was trying to crack the earth open. I let him stay longer than the others, taught him to shape copper first, then tempered steel. He made a crude medallion for his sister's birthday. Not pretty, but real. He left it on her doorstep and walked home barefoot in the snow. I started filming the sessions. Just one angle. No faces, just hands, heat, and metal. I uploaded them under a generic handle. No comments, no titles. One of the clips went viral. Cody's first clean strike on a heated bar, the sound ringing clear like a bell. That video got picked up by a gallery in Seattle. They reached out. I declined. They wanted pieces to display, a backstory, a name to attach it to. But I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to disappear. Every month a letter arrived from her, different envelopes, different handwriting, always empty inside. I never opened them. One afternoon I tossed a stack of them into the fire, watched the paper curl inwards like old skin. One envelope refused to burn at first. Must have been a thicker paper stock. But it folded eventually, without sound, without protest. That night I brought out the pendant I'd been working on for months, forged from the coin I had melted our wedding ring into. It was a jagged shape, abstract to anyone else. But for me, it was a date, not engraved, bent into the metal. Each corner pointed to a season. Each line mirrored the day I found that photo of her holding another man's hand. That piece I did take to court, on the day her final appeal was denied. I didn't say anything. I just placed it on the judge's bench, then walked out before the hearing even ended. She showed up in town once, at the edge of the forge property, standing just outside the rusted gate. She didn't call my name, didn't step closer, just watched as I hammered through a 6-foot iron rod, sweat soaking through my shirt. I didn't acknowledge her, just worked until the sun dropped below the horizon. When I finally looked up, she was gone. I stayed silent for a long time after that. Even my hands stopped shaking eventually. A year later, I transferred the forge's ownership to a community trust. I signed the paperwork quietly, alone, and walked away before anyone could thank me. The place belonged to them now, to the kids, the bikers, the ranchers, the broken. I'd built it to burn something out of myself, but I didn't need to own it anymore. I filmed one last lesson. Cody stood by the anvil, hands still too small for the weight he held. I guided his swing, but I didn't speak. There was no need. The only sound in the frame was metal striking metal. Sparks rose into the air like fireflies. That night I returned to the attic one last time. I had one letter left, the most recent one. No return address, no markings. I stared at it under the forge lamp. The envelope had been sealed with wax, her favorite trick from college days. I broke the seal, slid the paper out, blank, like always. I fed it to the fire. The wax crackled, the page curled, and the anvil rang once more. The past wasn't gone, but it was reforged into something hard, unshakable, and finally, mine. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.